Welcome everyone to Storytime with Papa Henry. And we are reading Captain Daly's Crew at Thunderhead Lake, a book written by Craig Massey. And we are just a few chapters from the end of this wonderful adventure story. Today, chapter 12, Another Clue. Do you remember what happened last time? What was the last thing that happened?
The guy killed the poor chipmunk.
Yeah, Snapper crushed the chipmunk. Remember how sad that was? Let's see what happens next. Sadness tugged at our hearts while we buried Chippy Chipmunk. We not only felt bad about losing a pet, but also about Snapper. How could anyone be so cruel and mean? I guess our sorrow showed on our faces, because when the others came back from the plane trip, Captain Daly said, "You look as though you lost your favorite hunting knife. What happened, boys?" Snapper was here, and Chippy hopped up on his knee, and that man crushed him to death. Pudge sobbed, and Captain Daly, who knows all about how bad a fellow could feel, went over and put his arm around our roly-poly pal's shoulders. "Pudge, I know it's hard, but remember, the Lord has promised to help over the rough places." Pudge managed a smile, and we described the visit by the fat man. Rufus burst out. "When that bad man Snapper killed the chipmunk, I tried to hurt him, but that big old man just swung his big old fist and toppled me." Fighting back at men like that doesn't do any good. We must let the Lord take care of things," the captain told Rufus gently. Poor little Ruf couldn't figure that out. And I guess a lot of folks think that fighting settles arguments. But if you think about it, the captain was right. If someone doesn't like you or treats you mean, the best thing to do is ask the Lord to help. "Well, boys, I'm curious about the person who covered your signal fire last night. Let's take the rowboat and see if we can pick up any clues," Dan suggested. Captain Daly stayed with Pudge while the rest of us went on the scouting trip. We took along our fishing rods and some food. The lake was ripply, but not so bad we couldn't enjoy the trip. It took about a half hour before Rufus sang out, "There's the place where we had the fire, and where them old sea monster ghosts popped out of nowhere." Dan sent the boat swishing up the sandy beach, and we piled out. "Now, Gary, tell me just what you saw." "Well, when we got to the edge of the lake, we heard the strange scream, and we saw sea monsters, or whatever they are, floating from that spot." "All right, let's tackle this thing in the right way. We'll check footprints of whoever doused your fire." Our search for footprints turned out to be a total failure because the recent rain had spattered the sand level. "Get back in the boat, fellas, and we'll head for the place where you saw the mysterious objects." Rufus drawled, "Now, Mr. Dan, ain't that asking for trouble? Maybe them old sea monster ghosts is just a-waiting for us, and maybe them things is feeling hungry, and maybe them things will eat us all up, and we'll be hurt or killed or something." "How about the bear you killed? You weren't afraid then," Slim piped up. That got Ruth started. "A great big bear that was. He was a-coming straight at me with his fangs a-hanging out 3 inches, ready to swallow me right up. And then I pulled back my trusty gun, and then another bear comes a-tumbling out of the woods, and..." How we did laugh. I don't think I ever heard anyone with such a wild imagination. Every time he told a story, it changed. Yet, while it was funny, it was also sort of sad, seeing how we couldn't believe anything he said. "It was about here," I told Dan, when we rode to the place. "Look, there's a path leading up from the water's edge," Slim pointed out. "It could be a deer trail, but we'll investigate and make sure," Dan said. We followed the trail about 300 feet when Dan, who was in the lead, motioned for silence. Just about then, I smelled cooking. Step by step, we eased our way forward until Dan again motioned. He stopped, and cautiously pushed aside a bush. I craned my neck over his shoulder and saw a curious sight. There was a man squatting on the ground with his back to us. He was cooking something over a tiny fire. A gun stood up against a tree a few feet away. Chuck and Rufus pushed up and gazed at the man. He rose to his feet and walked to a tree and tore off a few branches to feed the fire. When he turned to walk back, we saw his face almost hidden behind a black beard. What skin showed was burned a deep brown from wilderness life. Rufus saw the man and screamed, "It's the man from Thunderhead Mountain! I seen him with a gun! It's him!" The man sprang for the gun as Dan burst taking a flying tackle at the stranger. The two figures toppled to the ground in a mass of waving arms and legs. We rushed out to help, but the bearded man was quicker. He twisted and turned, and off came his coat in Dan's hands. The man dashed for the woods and was lost to sight. "Well, Rufus, I guess you did see a man that day we took the hike up the mountain trail. I sort of figured you were fibbing," Slim said. Chuck picked up the gun the man had left behind in his flight for freedom. "I'm sure glad this wasn't any closer to him. I'd hate to be on the business end of a blast." Dan examined the coat and reached in the pocket. He withdrew a leather pouch. The same leather pouch Rufus found on the mountain trail, and the same leather pouch Snapper had snatched from Pudge. "It's the same one, all right. Here's the map and the name Daniel printed. There's money in it, too." "That proves there's a connection between Snapper and this man," Chuck said. "Yes, and perhaps we'll find the answer to the other riddles before long," Dan said. "Let's trail our whiskered friend." Dan was an expert tracker, and he led us. At first, the man headed directly inland, but soon swung around and went in the direction of Thunderhead. "It's getting late, fellows. Let's head for the boat, and then tomorrow George and I will return and see what we can find," Dan told us. We retraced our steps and searched around the fire for more clues, but didn't find any until little Rufus screamed wildly. He had been a few feet off to our left, and when he ran toward us, his face was drawn with fear. "It's them old sea monsters! There's a coming for us over there!" Slim, not believing Rufus saw anything, walked real brave over to the spot and peered into the woods. A second later, he was screeching, "It's them! Yowie!" I never saw anyone run so fast as that long-legged fellow did. "Honest, they're over in the bushes!" Dan took the gun the bearded man left and walked over to the spot. He stared a few minutes. I must admit, I expected to see strange monsters come flying out at any second. Dan called, "Come here, fellas, and see the mysterious animals." Gingerly, we walked to Dan's side. What a sight met my eyes. There, nestled in the bushes, were two strange-looking things with long necks and tails. They were red with big yellow eyes. At first, I was ready to make a dash for my life, but Dan said, "Now watch." He raised the rifle and aimed. Crack went the gun, and the huge thing was gone. "Wow," Chuck exclaimed. "I see it all now." Dan grinned. "Let's take a closer look at the other one." We went over and found a rubber balloon measuring about 10 feet. It was like the animal-shaped balloons that folks use in parades and circuses. "And to think these silly-looking things had us half believing they were sea monsters," Chuck said in disgust. "How did they get out on the lake? What about the screams?" I piped up. "I think we'll find a boat somewhere on the lake. That man we saw probably held one of these things on the boat and pulled the other one on a rope. He screamed now and then to add effect." "He sure did," Rufus said, brave now that things were harmless. We carried the other balloon to the boat and rowed back to camp. The sun was gone and the camp was dark. We saw Captain Daly and Pudge at the fire cooking. Pudge turned and let out a war whoop. "Captain! Captain! Run for your life! It's a sea monster! The next chapter is called Tragedy and Joy. And we'll cover that next year when you come back from Christmas vacation.
Wait, just Thursday.
We have exams.